My castaway this week is the businessman and philanthropist John Caudwell. Today, he's a billionaire who made his fortune as the founder of the mobile phone retailer Phones for You. Back in the 80s, he was running a car dealership with his brother when he spotted the potential of cellular technology. Phones for You became Europe's leading privately owned mobile phone group. Then in 2006, he sold it all for £1.5 billion. Growing up in a council house in Stoke-on-Trent, one of his early business ventures was selling toys to other children in his neighbourhood. That whetted his appetite to be his own boss and make money, but not just for himself. Even as a child, he dreamt of helping others, and it's his charity work that drives him today. He formed Caudwell Children, which helps children with disabilities, over 20 years ago and remains its largest single benefactor. And he was one of the first Britons to sign up to Bill and Melinda Gates' giving pledge, vowing to give away 70% of his money during his lifetime. But back to business. He says, it's unimportant to me if I'm worth a few hundred million or a billion. What is important is that I make a success of business. Success is a personal need of mine. John Caudwell, welcome to Desert Island Discs.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with this personal need for success, John. Is it as strong today as it was when you first started out?
Yes, it's not quite as hungry as it was, because in the early days it was the hunger to be financially stable that gave a greater hunger. And so, and this stems, of course, from my father having a stroke when I was only 14 years old and dying when I was 18, and seeing my mother struggle dreadfully with the financial hardship and burden of that. But the underlying thing always in my life, whatever I do, is I want to be successful. It's to do with the end product and being very proud of the service levels and the way it changes people's lives or improves people's lives or improves the environment. So it's never going to be about money.
As a child, though, I mean, even before your dad became unwell, I think you were dreaming about being a rich businessman. You had a fantasy of that. What did it entail?
I just visualised myself in the back of a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, winding the windows down and giving £5 notes out to poor people. The Rolls-Royce epitomised the fact that I'd been successful, and the giving out the £5 notes was my desire to be seen as charitable and to help people. Of course, it's a very precocious and simplistic view, but that is sort of what I've gone on to do.
Time for your first choice now. Tell us about it, John. What have you gone for and why?
It takes me back about 20 years, 15 to 20 years, when my partner of the day, Claire, was really into Elton John and loved Bennie and the Jets. So Bennie and the Jets sort of epitomises for me those years with Claire, those years when I was working a lot with Elton's charity, and we went over to South Africa with him. And that was a fantastic experience, because we were working on his HIV projects in South Africa. And a real highlight of that was meeting one of the only heroes in my life, which was Nelson Mandela. So it's a very warm feeling about that relationship in those years.
Bennie and the Jets, Elton John. John Caudwell, you were born then in Birmingham in 1952, but you grew up in Stoke-on-Trent. How early did your appetite for business kick in, do you think?
When I was about 4 or 5, I gathered whatever books and toys I'd got and put them in the backyard of our terraced house and invited all the kids round to come and buy them. And that was quite a success. Everything got sold. I got no more toys and books left. So then I went round all the kids of the local neighbourhood trying to buy up items that they didn't want anymore so that I could have another yard sale. So that was the start of my entrepreneurialism. You would have never got rich out of it, but it does sort of show that I'd got this sort of instinctive trading mentality even at that incredibly young age.
Your father, Walter, worked in sales for an engineering company, and he was always keen to help people out, wasn't he?
I often joke that he was the first AA, because he'd stop at every broken down car at the road and invariably he'd fix them, and invariably I'd be given a shilling or 2 shillings for his trouble. For sitting in the car waiting patiently for an hour or so while he did so. He had absolutely got a charming and kindness in him, but with me, unfortunately, I didn't really from him get the love or the fairness that I would have really liked. In the very early years, when I was 5 or 6, I used to wet the bed, and he'd be very, very angry about me doing that. And I think looking back, he probably had PTSD because he treated me quite badly.
So your dad had carried his wartime experiences with him then, presumably?
I think he was scarred by, he'd been shot at, he'd crashed in aeroplanes, he'd seen his friends killed, and I think it had traumatised him.
Tell me a little bit more about your mum, Beryl, back then. She did lots of jobs to make ends meet. What kind of thing was she doing?
Well, she worked for a pottery firm on their sales and administration office. She had this horrible big terraced house to keep clean. And, she had me as a bit of a wild child who nearly drowned in the canal down at the bottom of the road, building rafts when I was only about 5 or 6 and got pulled out by one of my friends. She had to put up with me. And that was a big job.
Time for some more music now. This is your second choice today. What have you gone for and why?
Well, I chose She Loves You by the Beatles because when I was about 7, I loved the Beatles, and I managed to grow a Beatle cut haircut, which is amazing when you look at me today. And my father, well, both my father and mother, thought that the Beatles destroyed the music industry, replaced classical music and jazz with the most awful route imaginable. I grew this Beatles cut, and my dad eventually said, when he realised what it was, we're not having the Beatles anywhere near this house, and lopped it all off with his shears. And my hair actually never grew back properly after that. So it was also the end of my hair growing days and the end of my Beatle days, and a sort of an example again where my father just overreacted, really. But although there were sad times, there were of course very happy days as well.
The Beatles and She Loves You. John Caudwell, as you mentioned, when you were 14, your father suffered a severe stroke. How serious was the impact on him and on the rest of the family?
Oh, it was devastating. And that was the first of 2 strokes he was going to have. The second stroke way more serious, which was only about 6 weeks later. And it was just very, very sad to see a man that was dynamic, that was utterly capable. He could fix anything. Cars, vacuum cleaners, didn't matter what. My father could do it. And to see him cut down like that and unable to adapt it was very traumatic. And our relationship then suffered even worse because he didn't try, and I was upset by that. I wanted him to try. I wanted him to, and then he was agitated and angry with me because he felt that I didn't understand his position. And that's probably true, it was probably very true. And I would hate to be in his position because perhaps I would be exactly the same and give up, because that's not my life. My life is doing things and achieving things, not being stuck in a wheelchair. So, I'd like to think I could do a little bit better, but I think I wasn't understanding enough of him.
And how was he with your mother during that time?
He was very jealous of my mother, questioned her all the time. She could never go out, not that she had time to really, but even if she got invited out by a friend, she couldn't, because my father would be very miserable about that. I suppose I was okay because I could escape, and and I was at school all day and I could escape the family environment, but I couldn't lose that feeling that my mother was being really badly treated, the wrong word, because my father wasn't responsible for his actions. He could not help the way he was, but nonetheless my mother was having a terrible, terrible time of it, and I ended up building up a huge debt of gratitude towards her and desperately wanted to make her life better.
John, it's time for some more music. Disc number 3. What is it, and why are you taking it with you to the island?
Well, it's Bring Him Home by Alfie, because it absolutely reminds me of my mother, because she loves that music. But Alfie has got a very big heart, and I asked him one day, would he come and play for Mum in a bedroom? And he did, and he charged me nothing. I flew down in my helicopter, picked him up from his home, brought him to the house, total surprise to my mother. There's only me, Claire at the time, my mother and Pam, our amazing carer, in the bedroom when Alfie's singing all these songs. For me, his signature tune is Bring Him Home.
Bring Him Home from the musical Les Miserables, sung by Alfie Boe. So, John, I want to take you back to your school days, and I know that you don't have fond memories of school, especially your junior school. From day one, I think you were targeted by bullies. How bad did it get?
Do you know, unfortunately, and I say this very sadly and with great remorse, I found the way to avoid being bullied by being the bullier. I bullied other kids, but I sort of couldn't help myself somehow.
What would you say to the kids you bullied if you could speak to them now?
Oh, well, I'd absolutely say that I am sorry about that and ashamed, and ashamed for it. I'm ashamed of it. And, you know, I've spent the rest of my life, even though I've been building big companies and have been quite aggressive in those companies, if I've felt that I was beginning to veer on any bullying type of mentality, I've tried to draw myself back from that. But I always aspired to be fair. Now, sometimes, of course, irritation and frustration at somebody who did something very stupid or was very lazy would get the better of me. And, yeah, perhaps I was unkind again.
Were the results always worth it, or do you have any regrets over your management style over the years?
One of the keys to managing people is to treat somebody how they deserve to be treated. And if they're just deliberately or doing things that are wrong, rather than get too aggressive with them, it's better just to exit them from the business in the kindest way possible that leaves them with dignity. But I think, by and large, most of the people I've ever managed would say I did a great job on them. And certainly the ones that are successful, and there's thousands, thank me endlessly and continually. So, yeah, I'd got my failings, but overall I think I was a good boss.
And what is it like to have to, as you put it, exit someone from the company?
It's very, very, very painful, especially having to get rid of people who really are trying but just can't deliver.
But you still did it, no regrets?
You've got to do it. If you don't do it, you demoralise the rest of the workforce because they see you putting up with somebody and paying somebody who's not pulling the weight and not delivering, and you fail as a boss.
John, we've got to make some time for the music. Tell me about your fourth choice today. What is it?
Well, I met a wonderful girl named Catherine, and Maggie May takes me back to those teenage years and early 20s years. Rod Stewart also played for my charity, became an ambassador of the charity. So it reminds me of my wonderful wife and my 3 children and those early years, and that's Maggie May.
Rod Stewart. John Caudwell, you left school at 17 without taking your A-levels and joined the Michelin Tyre Company as an apprentice engineer. But your heart was set on running a company of your own, and in your spare time you started various businesses. What was your first?
I opened up a grocery shop. It was a little corner lock-up shop about 12 foot by 12 foot square, rented from Mrs. Shemmelt for £2 a week. Everything went wrong in this grocery shop in spite of me absolutely flogging myself to death on it in between all my Michelin work, which in those days was about 50 hours a week.
So after that you started a mail order business selling motorcycle gear. How did that go?
Well, I undercut the competition by about 20%. I still had 20% margin in them. And all of a sudden this business took off. And Kate was then delivering these parcels to the post office. We were there all night, every night, parceling them up. It was phenomenal. And of course, looking back at from this day, if the devastating telephone call that occurred had not occurred, I'd have probably been the Amazon of today.
So tell me about that phone call.
Then I got the phone call.
What happened?
The Bell staff representative called me and he said, all the other dealers are complaining because your customers are going in, checking out what size they are, and then ordering them from you, and all our dealers are upset. And they said, we've got to stop supplying you. I was so devastated that it knocked me for 6 for a few months.
What happened to you?
It left me in debt, and I just had to fight my way through and pay off my creditors with my Michelin job. And I just licked my wounds. I saw it as that, I just need to rewind, lick my wounds, solve my financial difficulties, ready to come again.
John, in 1980, you left Michelin. You set up a second-hand car dealership with your younger brother, Brian. And in time, Midland Garages grew to employ a staff of 7. You reached a modest turnover. Did you feel that you'd got to a place where you felt secure?
No, absolutely not. There was a lot of weeks of the year that we lost money. And so on a Sunday night, my brother or I might be there till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, hoping for that one sale that might turn that day into profit and might save the week.
John, it's time to make some room for the music. Disc number 5. What have you got for us?
Well, that's Frank Sinatra and My Way, because I bought this boat I'd never been out to sea before. I bought the 64-foot boat, and against everybody's advice, put my partner at the time, Claire, and my children on board, and sailed through the Bay of Biscay from Poole Harbour, through the Bay of Biscay, which is renowned to be a treacherous sea, down to the Straits of Gibraltar and up to Barcelona. We had some of the most unbelievably challenging experiences, gearbox failures, fog, rough seas, and we survived it all. And we went into the harbour in Barcelona. Claire came up with a bottle of champagne, put on Frank Sinatra, My Way. And ever since then, it's been my signature tune.
Frank Sinatra and My Way. John Caudwell, in 1985, you heard about a new gadget that you thought might be useful for your business. How did you first find out about mobile phones, and what potential did you see at that point?
Well, I saw a guy at the car auctions with one arm about 6 inches longer than the other. And that was because he was carrying this mobile phone in a great big suitcase, which was dragging his shoulder down. But it was amazing, because I needed to get on the phone to ring customers and say, oh, I can't get you a red Mondeo, but I can get you a blue one, or whatever it was at the time. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't get there because there was a queue. And this guy's there at the back of the auction hall, able to ring his customers. I thought, that's amazing. So I came back home and wanted to find out about mobile phones. Now, your listeners are never going to believe this, because it took my secretary 3 days to find anybody that could sell a mobile phone. You couldn't find anybody at all. You couldn't even find out about them.
But you did find a supplier, and in 1986 you became a mobile phone dealer. Can you remember how many phones you bought to begin with?
My first order was for 26 mobile phones, which took me 8 months to sell.
So what made you keep going then over that 8 months with those first 26 phones? Were you ever tempted to jack it all in?
No, never, because I don't think I saw the boom as it is, as it occurred. But I did see big volumes and big opportunities, big price reductions and big margins. So I stuck with it. And for 2 years, I lost £2,000 every single month.
That's a huge loss.
A huge loss.
How did you cope with that? That's a lot of stress to carry.
I was making decent money out of the car business, but it was still very painful.
But after 2 years of those losses, you decided to change tack. So you concentrated on selling the phones while Brian kept the car business going. How did that change your finances?
Within 2 weeks, I'd found a way of turning the £2,000 loss into a £20,000 a month profit, and growing. We became the leader in Europe in everything from mobile phone sales to retailing to trade sales, accessories distribution. Everything we did, we had one simple target: to be the best and the biggest.
John, by the year 2000, the turnover of your business empire, the Caudwell Group, by then had reached £1 billion. How many sacrifices did you have to make to reach that level of success? How many personal sacrifices?
Well, massively in terms of personal health, because for a period of time I lived on tranquilizers because I was working 22 hours a day. And
22 hours a day?
Now, I didn't do 22 hours a day every day, but my average was probably, on 7 days a week, it was probably an average of 16 hours, 17 hours work But for 5 or 6 days of every 3 weeks, I'd be doing 22 hours a day with no sleep. And my nervous system just wouldn't cope with it.
That is sacrificing a lot of your time, your life, to the business. Was there anything outside it?
No, I don't think. No friends. No friends, because I didn't have time to socialise. I had no time. The only time I had was for work.
I think you've called it 20 years of grief. That period of your life.
But no regrets, and it's enabling me to do what I do today, which is massively spiritually satisfying.
John, it's time for your next piece of music. Number 6. What is it and why are you taking it with you to the island today?
I had meatloaf for my 55th birthday.
This is the artist, not the food.
No, it is absolutely the artist. I love his songs, but Bat Out of Hell is probably nearest to my character.
Meatloaf and Bat Out of Hell. John Caudwell, in the 90s, you got into some trouble with the Inland Revenue by taking advantage of tax avoidance schemes. There were stories doing the rounds that you used to pay yourself in gold bars and fine wine to avoid national insurance. How do you look back on your attitude to tax at the time now?
At the time, I was, scratching my way forward. And this is not sort of an excuse, it's reality. I was scratching my way forward, and every pound that I could save, I could reinvest in the business. So paying as little tax as we possibly could was really important. But I think all of these tax fiddles, and even though they were legitimate, need stamping out. So for a long time now, I've been extremely proud of paying all of my tax, not moving to tax exile status, and just paying into the UK system. So would I do that again? No, I absolutely wouldn't. But I know why I did it at the time. It was to try and retain money in the business to expand it.
You eventually paid back £13 million to the revenue, and you're now a conscientious taxpayer, as you say. What changed your thinking? Where did the change happen there?
My social conscience was growing. I'd always had this charitable side. And rich people now still say to me, oh, well, the government will waste all your money, so why pay your taxes? Don't pay your taxes and do the charity work. But tax is absolutely vital for the fabric of Britain. If Britain's going to be Great Britain, we all need to stay here and we all need to pay appropriate taxes, as well as the charity work we do. So my thinking just evolved, and I ended up seeing, reducing of taxes something to be ashamed of rather than proud of. And there is a big groundswell of opinion out there amongst chief executives of public companies, of smaller companies, that the more tax you can avoid, the smarter you are. And there is a truth in that, because you do have to be smart, but it's wrong.
So in 2000, you founded your charity, Caudwell Children, and that helps children with disabilities. What does philanthropy give you that the cut and thrust of business doesn't?
When you see the way you've changed a child's life for the better, for me, there's no greater happiness or spiritual satisfaction from anything that you might do in life than you'll get from that.
Let's have some more music. Disc number 7. What's it going to be?
Well, this is my son, who sang this on stage. It's called Fix You by Coldplay. When Rufus was only about 8 or 9, he was a brilliant entertainer. And he said, Dad, can I get on stage at one of your events? There was 2,000 people there. And he jumped up on stage and dedicated Fix You to the children in our charity. And he felt, because he knew enough about the charity by then, that we could fix those children.
Coldplay and Fix You. John Caudwell, I want to ask you more about your son Rufus. In 2014, after suffering ill health for many years, he was diagnosed with Lyme disease. That's a bacterial infection mainly caused by tick bites. You set up a charity to help fund research into testing and treatment for the disease. How did what he has gone through affect you on a personal level as a father?
Oh, I was devastated, because my brilliant son, who was the most confident person you've ever met, turned into this anxious wreck. And never did I dream when I set up Caudwell Children 5 or 6, 7 years before that I'd be one of those people that needed help. And here I am now, with my own son, a brilliant young man with an amazing life ahead of him, who's struck down, and I was completely powerless to help. There was many, many, many times when we thought we'd lost him, and we used to have 24/7 people in his bedroom in case he tried to kill himself. I don't know whether he ever would. He's many times since said the only thing that kept him alive was because we were fighting so hard for him and loved him so much. But
you take a minute, it's emotional, I understand that, don't we?
But he is doing brilliantly now. He is another inspiration in my family. It's never, ever too late. You can come back from the most horrendous situation in life.
As we've heard, John, money can't solve everything, but you do enjoy the trappings of your wealth, I think. The helicopter, the house in Mayfair, you bought that for £90 million and spent millions more doing it up.
So I'm the rather weird character that will go to a charity event and maybe donate £1 million, which I've done many times in the past, and then the next morning be on a 6:40 flight out of Gatwick, EasyJet, for €49. When you get there,
not even premium economy?
No.
You're not even jumping the queue?
Not jumping the queue, just go, turn up at me £49 or euros.
What's that about then, John?
I don't need it. I only need things that are great for all my friends and great for the charity. And all of my assets I use for charitable purposes or sharing my good fortune with my friends. And that's wonderful. It's a lovely thing to do.
I'm about to send you off to the island. What will you miss most?
As a castaway with nobody there, you'd really miss the friendship, the companionship, the love and all of that. But there would be a huge challenge to survive, and I think that would probably keep me entertained for some time.
Well, we've got one more disc to hear, John, before we send you off to your desert island and find out. What's your last choice today?
Well, this brings me on to current day because I met my current partner 7 years ago on a charity cycle ride. She was an Olympian and one of the world's top 5 female cyclists. Not when I met her, but a few years before. Didn't see each other for 2 or 3 months after that, but then got together again cycling. And about a year later after that, she sent me a link to a track that she dedicated to her and I. And that was Truly, Madly, Deeply by Savage Garden.
Savage Garden and Truly, Madly, Deeply. So, John Caudwell, it's time. I'm going to send you away to the desert island. I'm giving you the books to take with you, the Bible, the complete works of Shakespeare, and you can have one other book too. What would you like?
Well, it would have to be surviving on a desert island, wouldn't it? Because that's what I'm all about. It's no good reading a book and dying. I need to live on that island and get rescued one day.
Fair enough. I will give you a survival manual to take with you. You can choose a luxury item too, though. What would you like?
Freckle-skinned, ginger-haired, burn in the sun like mad. So my luxury item would keep me alive, keep me comfortable, and that's a full-blown sunblock.
Well, it is on the practical side, John, but people have taken it before. So luckily for you, there's precedent. On the sunblock front, you can have as much as you like. And finally, John, which track of the 8 that you've shared with us today would you save from the waves if you only had time to grab one?
Well, I think it would have to be Coldplay's Fix You.
John Caudwell, thank you very much for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks.